It's a bad matchup. People classically think that D6 is weak to aggro, and it is, but it's weak to aggro in relative terms, right? Where it's better to be playing an aggro deck against it than like Quest Shaman, for example, but still D6 Warlock has all the tools to be winning any given matchup in the metagame right now.
Yeah, and it is interesting because I do believe Gaby and Blythe have put that Soul Rend in their list for this week, which does make sense because you expect to get sniped or attempted snipe by an aggro deck against D6 Warlock, so that does help. But Jarla not going for that. We'll have to see if the Mosh is going to get the job done. But as we dive into the first game, mulligan's already been made on Gaby's side, but Jarla, as ever, taking his time considering the options. And again, Hand of Gul'dan, typically one of the higher win rate cards in the deck to be in the mulligan. But against aggro, is it too greedy at this point?
Yeah, that's the question, right? It's against a lot of matchups. I think this is a pretty great looking hand. You have Rod already. So any free admission draw that hits Matron or any natural Matron draw is nutty when you have Runed and the hand in hand already. However, as mentioned, this is against aggro, and generally the two hands that win, as I was describing before, are multiple removal spells in your opening hand or just the absolute nuts, and the absolute nuts is Mithril Rod and free admission. So I think Jarla mulled away the hand there, looking to replace it with a Soul Shear or a Drain Soul or a free admission. I think there's enough cards that fill that gap that would improve the overall quality of his hand to make that justifiable. But I will say that, you know, on average, I'd say players trying to learn this deck probably underkeep Hand of Gul'dan.
And hey, it did end up with Stealer of Souls, and honestly, of course the next few turns worth of draw will happen, but I think there's a reasonable chance that Jarla just throws it out there, right, and just sees what happens.
Decent chance, yeah. We are already in a rough-looking spot here for Jarla if he doesn't start to piece some removal together, because that Dragonmore Overseer is a terror card in this matchup, because generally gets its work done. It's an annoying card in the regards that, you know, you have to play against it a few times until you realize how annoying it is, because it comes down on board, it makes a big minion, but then you have to play your removal spell on the small minion and leave the big minion behind, because the 2/2 Overseer still represents the biggest threat. So the 4/5 or the 3/6 or whatever it is that it's made is then left behind to keep on hitting face. And I think that could become a pretty big problem in the next turn or two.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those dual prong attacks, right, where you play it down, causes two problems to your opponent, not just the one. Jarla going to keep it simple there, just Drain Soul, and that'll probably be a little bit painful to see now with the follow-up of the Dragon Maw, because he probably would have liked to have Drain Souled that, but now with the touch pickup, I think that's worth a coin as far as I can see, Subtle.
Absolutely, yes. Rod Coin Touch is the absolute dream here. Best top deck in the deck that turn for Jarla, almost certainly.
You here for the tour? I've got exotic wares.
Can be the game plan. Gaby's just can keep on piling on the pressure. Traveling Merchant, decent draw there, it's got to be said.
You know what's really surprised me about this Shadow Priest deck is it's obviously not the card you generally want, but it surprised me how okay Benedictus is to draw if you have a reasonable curve, because a lot of the times, you know, historically the likes of Baku, it was such a terrible card. You put it in the deck for the long time effect, but Benedictus here for Gaby as a follow-up isn't the worst. It's another big minion for him to deal with. But Jarla on his side of the board now, to pick up a free admission, he's already got 3 demons, so he's guaranteed at least a 1 and a 1.
So let's see, Wriggling Horror pushes 9, Hero Power pushes
4 the tempo.
So that is 11 this turn, takes Jarla down to 14, and there is 9, 11, 12, 14 exactly on board. Thank you, Mind Renderer Lucia. It's taken a while for you to also become the most toxic tempo card in the entire game, but here we are.
That's it. We all know Mind Renderer Lucia from the long mirrors, the sniping, the combo pieces in the late game. But there were the odd times where you would do this and just set up a lethal push and then hand your opponent cards you know that won't deal with this. And Jarla's in this situation now. Fantastic setup from Gaby. And can Jarla thrive for anything here that digs him out of this mess?
I don't see an out. There's no Void Shard in Gaby's deck. It's cut from the deck for, you know, Chief of Firstly, it's a really bad card. If you're playing an aggro deck and you're paying 4 mana for 3 damage, Face Hunter laughs in your face. So a lot of people have cut it for the deck just purely from that reason. But this is the auxiliary effect, right? Is that you never give outs to your opponent on these tempo lock Mind Render Elutia turns.
I must hasten.
Isn't it 4 damage, or have I just not played enough Shadow Priest?
Sorry, 4 damage.
Yeah, okay. I was like, questioning myself then, and after yesterday's messes, I almost didn't want to say anything. Mankrik going to be played here. Thrive. This is about as good as it was ever going to get for Jarla, but...
Just hoping that the Enraged Mankrik gets confused there and attacks one of the minions instead.
Well, there is an additional card draw, right? So maybe he's hoping, although I don't think there's anything, right, that he even could have drawn with that mana left. It was just a great setup, a huge push, and honestly, Jarla, for example, already having, 3 of the normal costed versions of the demons in his hand, he just didn't have the draw he needed to really go nuts. Gaby just had all of the pressure.
There was a 2-1 on the board, right? Because he played the Wriggling Horror. So the out was to hit the Enraged Mankrik, then the Enraged Mankrik draws Guardian Orc Merchant, exactly. And you can Guardian Orc Merchant down the 2-1 and stay alive, which is the out that Jarla went for. He recognized it. I had to see him going for it, but before I recognized it, that's why Jarla is a significantly better Hearthstone player.
Yeah, that might have looked like a very silly turn, but it was the only thing that ever had a chance of keeping him alive, and then maybe he can recover after that. I mean, you can even see the touch in hand there, or what would have been in hand the following turn, but good spot from Jarla, but of course it wasn't enough, and that's going to be a great game 1 for Gaby. Not only getting this matchup, which I feel is pretty decent for the Shadow Priest, but also just it being that smooth, right? No early pop-off, a relatively late free admission there for Jarla, as you saw, it just didn't really do anything. Having the demons in hand, great game 1, but now Jarla's going to queue up his Quest Shaman, which again is... I'm going to start calling it just Perpetual Flame the deck, right? Especially when you consider it when it goes up against aggro. It's almost an all-or-nothing deck, at least for me, but there are those double Earth Elementals in there, Sottle, so it does give Jarla a bit more of a punching power in that mid-game.
I don't know why we're calling it Perpetual Flame the deck, when according to some boob who did our key cards, it's Earth Elemental the deck apparently. But yeah, there is a single copy of Landslide in here as well, which could certainly do very well against the Shadow Priest of Jarla. But in particular, I think Earth Elemental is a fantastic card. We talk about the benefit of just playing a big idiot against like Druid or Mage, for example, with Earth Elemental. But also, if you play Earth Elemental against Shadow Priest, the game also just kind of ends, right? Because it's one of the ways that you can generally counter Void Touched is you just play big taunts, because the damage, we call it 1 mana Raid Leader. Not quite, because that damage only works if it goes face, right? So if you're able to block with big taunts, that it's just a 1 mana 1/3 at that point, right? They still have to chew their way manually through your taunts.
Right.
I think Earth Elemental has the potential to put in big work in this matchup as well.
Completely agree. I think it's pretty much just Kazakus, right? That would help out Gaby with that kind of Earth Elemental, right? If you got Poison, for example, like that's the easy one shot. Even keeping it. What do you think of this mulligan, Sottle?
Wow, mid-rangey approach here from Gaby. Interesting. Yeah, Owen Wilson approves apparently. Jarla, on the other hand, just looking for those tempo starts. I'm a little bit surprised. I think I personally would have gone a little bit aggressively, but I would have been forced to choose. Like, I would have liked keeping either Mankrik or Kazakus here, but I would have been very torn on which one to keep. So maybe I would have deliberated longer and in the end just decided, you know what? A good chunk of the rest of my deck is 1-drops. I'll get one, right? And just keep the good cards.
Yeah, and of course, this is not what you want in the game. You want the 1-drop on 1. You want to be as maximum aggro as possible when you play a deck like Shadow Priest. You also know your opponent's almost certainly going to play Quest on 1, right? So there's that small wiggle room available there. And now Jarla's turn is even more limited because of that Neophyte coming down on 2. This is a great curve and setup to just try and overwhelm Jarla on this Shaman.
Just going back to that point of, you know your opponent's going to play Quest on 1, though, you can very easily look at that the other way, right? When you say, I know my opponent's going to play Quest on 1, so I really want to draw a 1-drop for doing that and get that on board and making sure I'm able to attack with it. I think there's 2 sides to that coin, certainly.
And that's us. I'm the silver lining and you're the cloud.
I mean, sure. That's why we're such a good team.
Yeah. Here, though, Mankrik is going to come down from Gaby. Does have that follow-up of Kazakus, and he even has like a flexible hand, right? He could go wider if he feels the need to, or just slam that Kazakus, and like weirdly enough, use Void Attendant as a like a game finishing card, as opposed to a 1-drop-on-1 kind of card.
Yeah. I think he is almost certainly thriving for his Enraged Mankrik next turn, right? I think that's mandatory. And then probably tossing in the Twilight Deceptor alongside that, seeing if he can pick up Raise Dead off that instead. Lines up pretty well for the next few turns.
And although it might look crazy, Kazakus on 4, that's great. It's like, right, but he could Kazakus on 5 and just pick a 1-mana golem, right? And give the +1/+1, poison if he needs it, any kind of these options, and just have that in the back pocket for an additional little push.
Yeah, I think crucially, if he plays the game out that way, Kazakus 1-mana golem for poison lines up perfectly into Coin Earth.
Exactly, yeah.
Right, which would be an ideal way for this game to pan out. Speaking of Coin Earth Elemental, Jarla really would have liked to have overloaded a couple of times by now, so that when he coins Earth Elemental, he instantly unlocks his mana crystals. But as of right now, that is absolutely not going to be the case. Gaby head in the clouds. This is not gab jamming. This is counting various counterplays that his opponents might have to a 3/7 in comparison to just playing out the Kazakus curve here.
Yeah, and if you're not used to seeing this version of Shadow Priest with the Kazakus, it doesn't run those Void Shards, which means Thrive will always get what you want effectively, right? With that, so.
Yep, those are the three options every single time. Even the version that plays Void Shard tends to only play one Thrive, so Thrive can then not discover the other Thrive, and you still get the guaranteed outcome where you always hit wife in that situation. Okay.
Kind of interesting now, right?
It is a little bit, yeah.
Like, does Gaby even care about this 1/1? Maybe Gaby just actually goes Wriggling Horror just to beef up his minions. I think that's probably the cleanest. I was looking at like 1/1 here just to go wide, but I think this is generally better. Just make them a little bit chunkier so they won't die to any kind of, the 1/1 totem pokes in and then there's some kind of spell damage, perpetual flame nonsense.
Crucially now, Gaby has made a minion that can value trade an Earth Elemental, which seems fairly ridiculous at this point in the game, but here we are. If Jarla were to coin Earth Elemental, takes the 2 overload, he then has 3 mana next turn. Cannot currently, with his current hand, overload twice next turn to get that mana back again. He's still on 0 of 3 on the quest, so it is going to be a high drawback Earth Elemental, a classic Earth Elemental. But I don't really see any superior option with the way his hand is playing right now.
At least it's only 2 overload. It's not the ultimate classic Earth Elemental.
True. I nearly said 3. There's so many cards that I have to set the red flags in my brain that they've changed because we've talked about them for so long.
Now Gaby does have the option here of this going for the Kazakus, and even if he goes and misses, he still has Guardian Orc Merchant to give one of these minions Divine Shield, so there is a backup plan even if he doesn't quite get what he wants, but looks like Gaby's going a different route here.
Yeah, I really liked this because the Raise Dead was appealing because it offers back the Wriggling Horror on a lot of occasions. It didn't here, but you can also see that the value of the rest of the pool is very, very good. Another Mankrik is fantastic, another Cult Neophyte is fantastic. Basically, whatever he ended up with here, he was going to have a powerful turn, right? Like this Neophyte coming down, sick. If that Neophyte ended up being Wriggling Horror again, still an extremely powerful turn, right? So I think the Raise Dead, no matter what the outcome was going to be, was a pretty good outcome there.
Yeah, and
now
as you
Jarla
mentioned,
has absolutely no shot of overloading twice this turn.
you think it just has to be Landslide, or does Jarla have to wait to maybe even go Diligent Note-Taker Landslide next turn?
Oof. What are we looking at here? It's 7, 3, 7, 9, 11 damage, 13 damage from the hero power, plus 5 from a Void Touched if it comes down, which would be 18 in total. So he's not outright dead.
Just close.
Stuff were to come down, yeah. He survives Kazakus 1-mana Golem Void Touched on 1 as well. You could afford to be a little bit greedy. The problem is, even if you go Diligent Landslide, there's still the 4/7 that needs dealing with, right? Like, you're still not really making a dent in that. Maybe you draw a Zapper off the top. Maybe you can fit in a Lightning Bolt or something that you draw.
Well, the issue as well is he can't go double Landslide because he won't be overloaded as well, right?
Oh, that's true.
So he can't actually proc it unless he gets Bloom or, whatever.
Yeah.
So I guess he's just committing to it now, removing, 5 power off the board for this turn, and hoping life looks a little bit nicer next turn instead. He does have Feral Spirit and Guidance to, again, try and delay this a little bit, but now it's just Mancrick's cousins at this point. They're all over the show in his hand now.
Gaby does have to decide when this Void Touched is coming down. It is kind of a weird decision in spots like this because obviously if you never play it, you're never going to get the effect out of it, but there's always that temptation to say, well, if I just put more stats on play this turn, then Void Touched is going to be nutty next turn. But, Quest Shaman does have this talent for just being able to clear boards out of nowhere, so I think this is still a very good chunk of damage to be pushing through with the Void Touched Attendant.
And do you actually like if he goes Wriggle in here to just Wriggle in the Void Touch? Because you don't need to die to Perpetual, right?
I agree, yeah.
Or I guess he could... it's off curve, but do the double 2-drops to just make as beefy a board as possible.
No, I think you still play Mancrick because that puts another full health minion in play anyway, right? Like, Chaplane would get something else out of range, but it itself is in range, so it doesn't really add that much to Perpetual Flame. Mancrick kind of does the same thing. I was actually going the third way. Yeah, you can get more with
the third.
Is it time? Is this burning a Perpetual Flame, Raven? You just have to close your eyes. Give me your hand, darling.
Please.
You feel my heart beating. Do you understand?
I wonder.
I'm not even going to join you on this one. So realistically... He's 1 mana off having like a good go of it, right? If he went Serpent Shrine, Note Taker, Perpetual twice.
Yeah.
That would be insane.
Investment opportunity would leave him with 5 mana. He could still go Note Taker, Bolt, Flame, which is a good chance of a majority board through, but it's a specific 1 outer off the investment opportunity, of course.
So you think he's just going to go Feral now and try and just soak up the damage? It hopefully will bump some of the minions down to a double Perpetual Flame turn next turn.
Finally is done with questline step 1.
Turn 6. Some people have got getting Prakan down next turn at this point.
Yeah. Warlocks have already played their Tamsin and dealt 25 to you at this point.
Yeah. Gaby going through Wriggling. I was wondering if now was the time to go Kazakus into Traveling Merchant to then threaten, a 5-cost golem instead.
More big health minions in play, right? More damage being pushed. The multi-threat is being offered. He is at 4, so Jarla does have 1 turn of wiggle room if the board can get cleared, but it'd have to be board cleared into instantly discovered healing the next turn as well. He'd love somehow to be going back to his D6 tech and for that Minari Mosha that's on the board to actually end up being relevant somehow in this game, but that's just not how Shaman works. Needs big help from guidance here. Okay.
Oh, okay.
Revolve's interesting.
And if he
3 drops,
overloads...
2 drops, 1 drops. Okay.
He has to make sure he wants the correct order here, because if he overloads first, won't he make the 3/3 now? So he wants to trade Revolve and then do some overload shenanigans?
He's on 1 out of 3 still, so he has a lot.
Oh, sorry, apologies. I thought it was 2. My bad.
Yikes, the 1/8! Oh, the 1/8 is disgusting! I think that is the highest health 5-drop.
Could you repeat?
That's double flame, though.
Yep.
He just needs the 50-50 of at least...
Oh, get out!
1 of the small minions to push enough damage.
Absolutely get out.
He just has to click it again, right? Surely. Oh, okay. Actually, yeah, I didn't really think about this.
Beefs up the taunt, overloads again, and gets a second taunt in play instead. Probably going to end up being more protection in general, especially because the minion that's guaranteed to be left alive is an augmented porcupine, which is going to push some damage when it attacks through anyway.
Oh,
Take
insta
one
picks.
here for the lethal push.
Missed.
Doesn't get it though. Okay.
Probably gone for card draw, I imagine. Yep. Does have the 1 damage from the rush. Maybe that makes a difference. Dragon Maw. Not really what he's after. Gaby's going to try and go for the 2 to face. Nope.
Hello? I was going to say this, attacking this first is smart because it maximizes the chances of the damage hitting relevant targets, right? Face or either of the 2 taunts are relevant targets in that position. So he attacks with it first and then of course is trolled immediately by it hitting the only irrelevant target twice.
Can take this a little bit slower though because he does have this Dragon Maw. And do you prefer that over Mancrit?
I mean, aren't you just pinging face?
I
Surely
guess.
you're just pinging
I
face.
guess.
Surely.
Make them heal.
I mean, make them have to find heal from somewhere and then,
Yeah.
right? It's not.
Yeah, I guess. I get carried away because Dragon Maw is so strong, especially with this board he's got. But yeah, the pings. Oh. Possible?
There's an out, there's a bloom. Yeah, bloom into tidal is enough mana to play it, right?
You saying
Gets
there's
it
a chance?
immediately off the first one. He doesn't. Charge Call is the only card with any hope of doing anything there, so you just bloom it and take your 8-drop, but then what even is your 8-drop at this point?
How?
Out of this?
There is a good 8-drop for health, but it's armor based on Death Rattle, not
Yes.
instant health. So, yeah, unless there's something I don't know about.
You win this.
Yep, Jarla dead again. 2 very aggressive openers from Gaby on this Shadow Priest, and honestly, if I was looking at Gaby's lineup, this is the one deck that I'd maybe ask questions about. You know, I'm not a huge fan of Quest Shaman overall, but I absolutely understand its utility in Last Hero Standing, and some of the matchups that it does just have a really strong, you know, 65% plus matchup against in some of the decks that are going to try and queue into it. Shadow Priest, you know, I wonder whether that's your aggro deck of choice over, say, Face Hunter, or whether you go with a lineup without an outright aggro deck like Jarla has been doing. So this is the one deck that I would have pointed some fingers at and asked some questions about, and so far it's passing its exam with flying colours right now as Gaby is storming to a 2-0 lead. But don't forget, Jarla was in this exact position yesterday and managed to reverse it and come all the way back with the mage.
And it is going to be an interesting matchup with this mage he has left over because it is the Gadgetzan Auctioneer mage, so there are certain elements of a slower version of mage, right? You're running 2 Gadgetzans, there's the mana biscuits, which you can argue are slower because you have to just pay the mana for them initially in a lot of cases. But there's also the idea that Priest is a very aggressive deck, but it's a very minion-focused aggressive deck. It doesn't often have the ability Hunter does of minions first, burst spell damage later, because as you've seen in those 2 games, there aren't really a lot of spells in the deck. So it's one of those matchups where I'm not sure where I lie on it specifically, but I still think the Priest will be able to give the mage a good run for its money here.
Yeah, well, we shall see, because we've certainly seen Mage getting the edge on a couple of matchups that were perhaps unexpected, particularly in APAC, where that Bread Baker tech is coming in very clutch in a couple of positions. Gadgetzan Auctioneer maybe not quite the same advantage, but yes, Mage struggles to aggro, that is true, but it's not a given. They don't just fall over in most situations. I think Face Hunter might be the toughest because they have the most consistent damage from off-board, but still the majority of Priest damage comes from the board, and the board is the thing that Mage is fantastic at shutting down. So if an early Ice Barrier can come down to force Gaby to interact with it, that's a huge deal. And then suddenly, if the flurries and brain freezes and fire sales do start coming out in good numbers from Jarla's deck in a timely manner, then we might just see him pull up another surprise reverse sweep here. But, you know, we've all seen the script, right? We know this is a Gaby 3-0 deep down.
Well, thanks, game. Beat me to it this time. But let's just remember the X factor as well, which is that card on the far right. Gaby throws it away quite rightly, but an Elucia versus a mage halfway through that mage's game plan can be backbreaking, not only to remove the removal and burn options from the mage on that following turn, but also just the fact that a lot of the time the hand's discounted, there's burn spells in the hand, so sometimes the priest can go Elucia into kill you with your own spells.
And I believe it was in this matchup in the Americas region last night where we saw a world first, Incanter's Flow being thrown away from the opening hand at 3 mana, which sent TJ and Lorinda into an absolute panic. TJ, I believe, looked it up, and even in the specific matchup against Priest, it is kept 95.8% of the time, I think it was. Something along those lines. But yeah, certainly the Incanter's Flow nerf is going to have an impact here, perhaps more so than in some other matchups where 3 mana do nothing can be very, very punishing.
Right. Gaby doesn't have the best opening in the world, though, right? It's still strong, but he doesn't have a good turn now. Got to decide between Wriggling Horror, digging for a spell that he's going to pick, and then the Void Attendant. I think it's way too early when that thing just dies to a brain freeze. I think Void Attendant is very much a play it, bank the damage, and assume it's going to die the turn after kind of playing this matchup.
You are never going to get a better window to coin Incanter's Flow than this, though. I understand the setup from Gaby. He has a couple of minions that he's very interested in holding on to long term here, the Wriggling Horror and the Void Touched Attendant. So he wants to bank the mana into that Raise Dead first to make sure he can keep the Void Touched Attendant train running as fast as possible. Jarla will know what's up, right? Like you're a competent Hearthstone player. You've seen your opponent play Thrive on turn 2 and then play Void Touched Attendant. You know that they have Raise Dead in their hand. You just don't really have that much of an option to play around it. Like that Void Touched Attendant has to die at some point. I suppose the best way to play around it is to kill 3 minions if you can.
Just win.
Yeah.
It's interesting though, right? Because he can... I did wonder whether he was going to finish the turn now just killing the Wriggling, so that it leaves the Void Attendant up, but there's only the Void Attendant that can attack, so it's only really pushing 1-2 additional damage if the hero power's there.
Actually just complete second quest line this turn as well if he wants to, right? Just plays Mana Biscuit and then uses the Biscuit. Like plays Mana Biscuit, conjure Mana Biscuit for the Arcane spell, and then she uses the Biscuit immediately to go Second Flame Flurry. It's a little bit of a waste of a Flurry, which is why I suspect he's not going to do it, and he doesn't. But it was possible for a bit of a turbo quest action.
Yeah, and in a similar way, this is pretty good as well for Jarla, right? He just kills the Void Attendant, which means if there's a Raise Dead, well, okay, you get +1 damage this turn.
True. Yep.
And funnel cakes.
But now Gaby's doing the thing, right? He's building a wide board, and Jarla knows there's a Void Attendant at any given moment, unless he can kill off multiple minions this turn, which he can.
I suppose I misspoke on the previous turn, because actually I was saying, you can play around Void Touched Attendant by killing 3 minions. You can also play around it by killing 1, right? Because then if you're just giving back the Void Touched Attendant, not the end of the world if your opponent is that low on resources after only Raise Deading for 1 minion.
Ooh, didn't really freeze the best target. Does get to discover a spell, though.
Oh, yeah.
Wait, Snap Freeze, right?
Oh.
Yeah, Snap Freeze on the Merchant, and then just Flow this turn, I imagine, from Jarla?
Yeah, I think that's the actual play that makes sense.
As opposed to the hilarious play of Triple.
I can't resist it. Yeah, whenever I play Mage, my goal is not to win games. My goal is just to play as many flows as possible and then do stupid things. Dropping the Biscuit here for Arcane Tick on the final quest line, so he just needs Fire, has Ignite in hand. If he would want to, he can go Ignite Biscuit Varden to complete quest and play the reward fully next turn, but I would imagine there will be too big a board state hanging around for him to feel comfortable doing that.
consider.
And Gaby has a few options now as well, right? Because he could just utilize his mana, play the 2 minions he has in hand with the Mancrick and Coulter and Chaplain. Raise Dead to just try and dig for another Attendant before the pool gets muddier, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
I do think I like Mancrick and then just maybe Chaplain the Mancrick. It's just 2 6 health minions on the board. One of the other minions has Divine Shield.
Quickly.
Or is he going to try and make the Void Attendant stick instead?
I think he'll protect the... Yeah, he's going to end up protecting the
Okay.
Notch, I believe. It just means, you know, obviously flow has come into play, which makes life a little bit difficult to really change all your breakpoints, but, you know, you're trying to get as many minions in position to be protected against Fire Sale, particularly your most important ones. I think that makes the most sense. So the Divine Shield and the buff on the Void Touched Attendant means that Fire Sale is not really a factor when it comes to clearing that minion.
I wonder.
Now Jarla's got hold of an Ice Barrier, which will help, but if he can't kill this Void Touch, then the board just chews through Ice Barrier like it's almost nothing anyway.
What to do? What to do?
So, what if Jarla plays his whole hand apart from Cram Session? Does he can proc the quest, right? He can get Dawn Grasp in his hand?
What to do? What to do?
Yes.
So then next turn he has Dawn Grasp, Cram Session with double Incanter's Flow? Looks about the only good plan I can come up with.
Yeah, I think that's about the best we've got.
Oh, he's not going to play the Incanter's Flow this turn. I'm a little bit surprised with Cram Session in hand.
You wanted to use the Biscuit this turn
Yeah.
to play the Cram Session as well?
Well, to play the Flow as well, yeah.
Sorry, that's what I meant, my bad. Yeah, I can see it. I mean, next turn he does have full mana with the Biscuit to use that anyway, and maybe he's feeling like an Auctioneer out is still better than the Varden out at this point for like a top deck, and then he can use the Biscuit with a Incanter's Flow in his deck. I don't know, it's very tough to say.
It's very
Really,
tricky,
really
yeah.
difficult position, and you have to give credit to Gaby as well for using his Divine Shields and his health buffs and everything else as effectively as he's done to make this as difficult as possible.
It's an absolute nightmare he's giving Jarla every turn, isn't he? Because this is, one, it's just difficult in general, but these, like, the health totals, the Divine Shields, as you mentioned, there's still just, we're talking about the Void Touched all the time, there is just a 5/8 on the board as well, right? Like, that's just been chilling there for a while as well. So the Traveling Merchant being an additional threat, even though it's more of a simple threat than some of the other cards that Gaby's played this game. And just as much as I said last turn, the Ice Barrier just gets chomped through like it's nothing if he just goes for Ice Barrier here. So it's why we see Jarla just hovering over a Ruined Orb, just to see if there's anything he can go for. I don't know what that could be, if I'm honest. Like, Devolving Missiles?
Shooting Star, like, yeah, again, even the positioning with the Divine Shield spread into different spots in the game.
Oh, that's not going to be it. Wow.
Rough.
Just like that. Gaby raises the hands in the air. There's the Gab Jam we all know. And that's just going to be 3-0 Sottle. Very impressive, and not with some of the decks we were maybe expecting to see. Because, of course, Gaby had his Warlock banned, which meant he had the Miracle Druid available, the Shadow Priest, and his Quest Shaman. And the Shadow Priest was all he needed for this one. And it was some really strong matchups. The Elucia coming in clutch a little bit earlier on. But it just looked oppressive, didn't it, this Priest?
It really did, yeah, and I think, honestly, that was a little bit of an eye-opener to me, because... Yeah,
Not been a fan, have you?
I mean, it's not like necessarily a fan of the deck's power level. I appreciate the power level of the deck, and I know that it has a role in certain matchups and how it does things. I just kind of have it filed as a fairly brain-dead deck, right? Which, you know, generally top-level players aren't going to get as much edge with this as, say, they would do with like Celestial Druid or D6 Warlock, the other decks in Gaby's lineup. Even Quest Shaman, right? Which even though I don't enjoy that deck as much as some of those others, I do also appreciate it's very difficult to play in certain spots. But watching that and just seeing the precision usage of the different health buffs and Divine Shield across multiple matchups, and planning out curves and impacting his opponent's plays in a negative way on each individual turn there from Gaby. And certainly from watching some other players like Habu Gabu play the deck as well, for example, and talk in depth about some of the mulligan strategies and the particular outs as well. My eyes are being open to the agency that player skill does have there with that deck a little bit more. So well done to Gaby. Jarla, the incredible streak has continued. He is back here as a Saturday gamer in top 8 again, but I mean,